Today I'm going to read Princess Disgrace, second term at Tall Towers. Chapter 5, 100 Lines. Old Finhart sighed as she led Grace up to the staff room and signed a black-edged punishment slip of a crow feather quill. "It's Saturday tomorrow," she said, handing the notice to Grace, "but you will spend it in the library writing lines." "What about the dragon?" said Grace. "It would serve Finhart right if the great beast suddenly swooped into the courtyard roaring and blowing fire." But almost as soon as she thought it, Grace shuddered. She knew Hay was right. The dragon's favorite food is always a nice fresh princess. Some sweet and dainty like scarlet could make a perfect mid-morning snack. "I have sent a message to Keeper Falcon, telling him what you claim to have seen," said Finhart, "but I hardly think we need to call a troop of royal guards. You have let your imagination run away with you, Young Majesty. There have been no dragons on this island for many years." She placed a quill in the ink pot if the matter was closed. "You have to believe me," cried Grace desperately. "I did see a dragon. It flew right above my head. Its tail was 3 times as long as a sash." Grace waved the thick satin ribbon in the air, and she remembered that Billy had chewed the end and tried to hide it behind her back. "I could saddle up my unicorn properly this time and help search the island," said Grace quickly. She was desperate to protect her friends, but thinking about the danger to herself. Every sign she had won a jesting tournament at the end of last term. She felt more like a knight than a princess anyway. "You will do no such thing," said Finhart. "In fact, you are banned from riding for a whole weekend." "But—" Grace bit her lip. She knew there was no point in arguing, and when Keeper Falcon came strutting to the staff room, he laughed as if the whole thing was just a joke. "I was up on those cliffs myself. I saw nothing," he said. "The whole idea is ridiculous. Current crimson dragons are extinct. They have been for 15 years. Ever since you drove them away from the island," muttered Grace under her breath. "There's no way you can have seen the creature you describe," said Keeper Falcon, fatally pacing the room and looking out of the tower window as if there was somewhere he could be. "But couldn't she have seen sleeping, hibernating for somewhere all this time?" asked Grace. "Dragons do live hundreds of years." "I don't think you need to tell Keeper Falcons about dragons, Young Majesty," said Finhart crossly. "He is a world expert on the subject." Keeper Falcon was already hurrying towards the door. "I suggest you spend less time looking for dragons and climbing trees from now on, Young Majesty," he said sharply, "and spend more time thinking about how to be a proper Tall Towers princess." "Quiet," said Finhart, wagging a bony finger at Grace. "You have the Ballad of the Flowers to think about first art." The next morning, Grace was in the library even before it was time for punishment to start. "Ancient dragons in the world," she muttered, pulling a big red leather book on the shelf. And there it was, the very last picture in the book. Coronet Crimson Premium. Following the dragon's purchase on Coronet Island, these magnetic but dangerous creatures were driven from their spring nesting grounds. Coronet Crimson Female. Her dragon, just like the one she had seen, right down to huge silver-tipped wings and gold claws. "The Coronet Crimson dragon is now truly extinct," she read. Grace ran her fingers across the page, tracing the shape of the dragon's wing. It was so sad to think these magnificent creatures had died out. "But I never saw one. Either everyone else is wrong or I am," murmured Grace, feeling as the whole world was against her. She flicked back through the book, looking at the picture of spotty green dragons, eggs, and mothers with their wings tucked around tiny pups. There was a section on dragon myths and legends from different countries. Grace even saw a picture of a whole village, all dancing together in a long line, with a red silk dragon costume lifted over the head and the legs becoming the limbs of the beast. "Time to get started now," said Fairy Godmother Webster, the old librarian who was supposed to be watching Grace while she wrote her lines. Grace closed the book, her head full of swirling dragons. She unrolled her scroll, dipped her fried quill in a pot, and ink began to write. I must not gallop my unicorn on school lawn. Grace wrote until her twist hurt. The trouble was, Flynn had said they had to be 100 perfect lines. No blotches or blots or you'll have to start over again. Grace was so miserable that she smeared and smudged her work even more than usual. Dragon poo! She murmured under her breath. She was not a very princessy thing to say. Sometimes I don't even want to be a proper princess, she grumbled, as a blot of ink spread across the bridge. No wonder her friends hadn't let her make new invitations. Her stomach twitched into a tight knot as she remembered how she had ruined the beautiful cards. How could she have been so stupid as to gallop across the lawn like that in the first place? If only Billy hadn't charged quite so fast. It was her own fault. She should have put a proper bridle on him. She couldn't be angry with Billy. But she could be angry with Precious. Her spiteful cousin had gone out of her way to stir up trouble with her friends. Now the two girls were barely talking to Grace. The three of them had been planning a lovely picnic all week, but they probably gone off with Precious now instead. Oh, Dragon Pooh, said Grace again. She stabbed her quill into the page so that a new blot of blank ink spread across the parchment. I'm going to be here all day, she groaned. But just at that moment, Izumi poked her head around the library door. Psst, she whispered. You safe to come in? Grace glanced over at Fairy Godmother Webster. The old librarian had fallen asleep hours ago with her head resting on a copy of Ancient Dragons Over the World that Grace had taken from the shelf. She was snoring happily as she had dozed off on a soft feather pillow. All clear, Grace smiled. She wanted to clap her hand when Charlotte Scarlet was there too. We thought you might need some help, whispered Izumi as she crept into the library. We know old Flynn are always one line so perfect, said Scarlet, never taking her huge weird eyes off the sleeping librarian. Grace let out a long sigh of relief. She should have known her friends wouldn't stay angry at her for long. I do need a bit of help, she laughed, pointing at the inky scribble on the page. Oh, Grace, smiled Scarlet. That's terrible, chuckled Izumi. Even worse than we thought it would be. It's a good job we brought this. The smile faded. Grace and her friend began to unroll a clean white scroll. I know you should do the punishment yourself, said Scarlet. But we felt sorry for you, continued Izumi, so we've written the lines for you instead. You felt sorry for me? Said Grace, a hot blush creeping up her neck. They were starting to sound like Precious. We did half each, said Scarlet excitedly, pointing to a row after row of clear, curly lines on the bright white page. We made our handwriting look as much as like yours as we could. Only much neater, of course, said Izumi. Only a few small blotches, just to make it look real. Grace looked down at the hard work her friends had done. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the scroll. Hand these now and we can go for our picnic, said Izumi. Just the three of us, said Scarlet. But Grace didn't move. Let's put this mess in the bin. Izumi grabbed the corner of the Grace's own ink-spattered scroll. Oh dear, these lines would never have got past Flynhurst, she laughed. They're really disgrace. Don't touch that, said Grace, snatching her scroll away. That's all you think I am, isn't it? A total disgrace. No, Izumi stepped back in surprise. We don't think you're a disgrace, just these scratchy old lines. We knew you'd make a mess of them, so... Yes, I just make a mess of everything according to you, snapped Grace. She barked so loudly that Fairy Godmother Webster sat bolt upright and blinked. What's all this noise? Said the old librarian, opening one eye. Have you finished your punishment, Princess Grace? We just came to see how she was getting on, said Izumi quickly. Grace glanced down at the perfect lines her friends had written for her. She knew that if she handed them, she could escape from the library right away and head off on a picnic just like they all had planned it. Maybe she could even take the binoculars and search for the dragon. But she couldn't do it. She picked up the perfect scroll, scrunched it into a ball, and tossed it to the bin. Scarlet gasped. I haven't finished yet. I'm sorry, Fairy Godmother, said Grace. Those lines were no good. Well, you better hurry up, said the librarian, laying her head back down the desk. What did you do that for? Hissed Izzy. Our writing was perfect, just like you two, said Grace. Fierce tears were pricking down the corner of her eyes. Perfect Princess Scarlet and perfect Princess Izumi, always rushing to rescue the poor, distractious Princess Disgrace. It's not like that, said Scarlet. We're only trying to help. I don't want your help, snapped Grace. I don't want to be your friend either. The words were out of her mouth before she could stop herself. Fine, to Izumi. Is that what you want? Said Scarlet. The pity in her eyes was far worse than the anger in Izumi's. The two girls turned and walked out of the library. Grace picked up her quill with shaking fingers. I must not develop my unicorn, she wrote. But now it was the tears streaming down the face that blotted the page. Chapter 6. Monday Morning Ballet Class. On Monday morning, Grace was in a truly bad mood. She had barely spoken a word to Scarlet Izumi. There was no sign of the dragon. Grace knew she really had seen the enormous creature, but decided that the dragon must have been flying over the island and not stopping. If Cardinal Crimson are really extinct, thought Grace, then the one I saw must be the last one left in the whole world. She won't be coming here to the nest. She'll be roaming the seas, desperately hoping to find a mate. Grace felt sad for the lonely dragon, far out there across the ocean somewhere. There would never have been any proof that she had been here at all. Everyone would go on believing that Grace had made up or imagined it her. Now, on top of everything else, it was double ballet of the first two lessons. It wasn't that Grace didn't like ballet. She was usually happy to give it to her best shot. It was just that the other 12 princesses in her class were so much better than she was. They'd all been taking dancing lessons ever since they could walk. That's what proper princesses do, as Precious said at least 5 times a day. The first thing Grace had learned when she could walk was how to milk a yak. Crackling was not like the kingdoms the other princess came from. It was cold and rocky and far away from anywhere else. The only thing that ever danced in Crackling was the wind in the trees. Grace's mother had died shortly after her little sister, Princess Pig, was born. There was no queen to organize balls and ballet shows. The king and his band of hairy warriors would rather roast yak meat and gather around the fire to tell tales and freeze their beats than dress up and attend a dance. Grace doesn't even have a ballroom, for goodness sake, Princess told the entire class, let alone a ballet studio. So, while everyone else was already advanced, Grace was just a beginner when it came to dance, a very clumsy beginner. Madame Lightfeather, the ballet teacher, always had to stop the lesson and ask the rest of the girls to wait, balancing on their pointed toes, while she showed Grace how to lift her heels and reminded her yet again not to stamp her feet. Up in the little attic dormitory she shared with Scarlet and Izumi, Grace frowned as she tried to tie her messy hair into a neat ballet bun. Her friends usually did this for her, but today Grace was refused to ask for help. They're always interfering and doing things for me, she mumbled. No wonder I don't get any better by myself. By the time she finished, it looked more like Grace had caught a fight with her lost Coronet Crimson than working over brush and comb. I'll have to do, she sighed, flopping down her bed and pulling so hard on her pink ballet tights that her toes ripped right through the other end. Just when she thought she couldn't get any worse, Scarlet perched perfectly across the dormitory and clapped her hands. Today's the day we got to choose what sort of flower we want to be in the ballet show, she said excitedly. Perfect, groaned Grace. She had no idea what flower she could see. Not many flowers grew in Crackland, and she hardly knew the difference between a rose and dandelion. But just at that moment, sporty Princess Latisha came dashing to Skydorm. Stop! Change out your ballet outfit, she said. Madame Lightfeather has sent a message that we could come to the class in our riding clothes. We have to bring our notebooks too. We're going to out and about the island. Really? Grace tripped over the end of her bed as she bounced to her feet. We're riding our unicorn instead of ballet class. For the first time in 2 days, a big grin spread across her face. Madame Lightfeather reminded Grace of a flamingo, who was often dressed in pale pink and was nearly always balanced on one long, thin leg. She looked totally out of place and a little nervous, standing in the stable yard as the unicorn jostled to get the gate. "Young Majesty," she squealed, springing backwards as Billy tried to nibble the edge of her tutu. "At this time of year, Cornet Island is home to many beautiful spring flowers. I want you to ride out in search for one you would like to represent in the ballot show." Grace's heart jumped. She still couldn't quite believe they're going to go and ride instead of having the Monday morning lesson at school. "But what about the big scary dragon Grace saw?" Gooped Precious, pretending to tremble and bite her nails. "Surely it might eat us alive." "Oh, but I forgot." Grace made it all it up. Grace turned Billy's head away, ignoring her cousin. It was a ripple of laughter properly from the twins, but Grace didn't look around to see. Precious had made sure the whole class knew that the beautiful invitations for the Ballad of Flowers had been ruined, for that it was all Grace's fault. Most of them were furious with her, especially since they heard she'd fallen out with Scarlet and Izumi all the whole team. "On your right, I want you each to pick a sample of flower you would like to be pressed in your notebooks," said Madame Lightfeather. "However, if your flower is very rare, with less than 5 blooms growing on one place, please do not pick it up. Make a detailed sketch and return with that instead." "Come on," said Grace, squeezing Billy's sides with the heels. "Let's go." But she was right at the front, and Madame Lightfeather asked her to wait and hold open the gate for the rest of the class. "Girls," called Precious, barking for what to write with Scarlet and Izumi, "let's stick together and be partners." "All right, but you should wait for Grace too," said Scarlet. "Really?" Precious smirked. "She might make us all gallop off the edge of a cliff or something." "Forgot it! I'd rather write myself," snapped Grace, too proud to tag along with her cousin, while she treated Scarlet and Izumi like her new best friends. "Never mind then," said Scarlet. Grace saw a look of hurt flash across her face as she turned the unicorn's head and trotted away behind Precious. "If you want to sulk, I can't stop you." Grace could have kicked herself. She realized too late that although she meant to hurt Precious, she hurt Scarlet instead. Her friend had been trying to mend the silly argument and make peace. Grace had thrown that right back in her face. Even from gentle Scarlet, that might be the last chance she would get. By the time Grace shut the gate, the princess had galloped off together down the beach. Chapter 7. Eyes in the Dark. Wait. Okay. Billy pulled on his rein desperately to follow the other unicorns across the sand. "No, we're going this way." Grace turned his head toward the steep, stony path that had led up the cliffs. She wanted to be alone, somewhere she could forget all but Precious and the other princesses. "At least for a while. I promise I'll let you have a gallop when we reach the moors," he said, as Billy picked his way carefully between the sharp rocks. "The princesses are riding this way, and Grace was riding this way, all alone." At last, Billy scrambled to the top of the cliffs. As soon as his hooves hit the soft moss of the moors, he was off. "Yippee!" cried Grace, forgetting everything. She could crouch low over Billy's neck, even as she was supposed to be looking for a flower. Her long white hair had fallen out in a scraggly bun. It flew out behind her hat as they galloped. While the other princesses rode side saddle, Grace always rode Billy in the way a knight would ride his charger, with one leg either side of the saddle. "Like a stable boy," Precious sniffed. But sitting side saddle, none of the other girls in Grace's class could ride as fast as boldly as she could. "Whoopee!" she cheered as Billy sprung over a stream. A minute or two later they slowed to a walk, as the path narrowed against the twist of a small dark wood. "Did you enjoy that?" laughed Grace, leaning forward to scratch her unicorn ears. But as she scratched, her hand stretched out, she froze. Ahead of them, at the bend of the path, something moved. Grace peered into the darkness beneath the trees. A dark shadow scratched the gloom. Two bright orange eyes burned like coals in a fire. Grace saw a long tail flicking back and forth. Scary, isn't it? The dragon, she whispered, her heart hammering inside her chest, half with excitement, half with fear. It's still on the island after all. Before she could turn Billy around, the beast sprang forward with a loud growl. Billy reared up. Grace wished that she had a crossbow like Keeper Falcon, so that she could loose an arrow to frighten the creature away. Or at least she had a stone she could throw. The only thing that she did have the small gold book that she used for making notes in the ballad class, the one she was supposed to draw a rare flower in. Shoo! She yelled, tossing the book high over Billy's ears and hoping it would be enough to scare the beast. She couldn't even see the creature through the unicorn's mane, which flew up wildly into her face as she his head in the air. Shoo! Cried Grace again, but as Billy thumped his front legs back to the ground, she saw that it wasn't a dragon, but an enormous yellow hound had blocked the path. It was holding a pretty gold notebook between its teeth and toppling over like a chew toy. Oh! Grace's heart stopped pounding with fear. She felt a thud of disappointment in her chest. It wasn't a dragon after all. She was no closer to proving it was real. Drop that right now! Hetty, Keeper Falcon's tiny dark-haired niece, scrambled out of the dress, fingering a long silver horn. Sit! She ordered crossed and grabbed the dog by its picky collar. The huge hound looked at least as she was 6 feet tall. Obeyed immediately and spat the book, which fell into the muddy pan with a plop and spatter of dough. Oh dear, thought Grace, that's going to cause trouble later. Madame Lavender always insisted they wrote notes about every new dance move they learned, but it was hopeless to try and rescue the book now. It was so chewed and wet in look that shapeless bough spun lying in a big puddle of dark dribble. Oh, Your Majesty, I'm so sorry about your pretty little book, said Hetty, darting forward to grab the soggy pages. But shook her head. Don't worry, I think it's too late to save it. You're a very naughty boy, Flum, said Hetty, as the dog rolled over and waited to have its tummy tickled. Flum? What a funny name for a great hound like that, laughed Grace. Yes, Your Majesty, courteous Hetty, as an enormous beak tried to lick the end of her nose. He's a dragon hound. His mother and father are called Fire and Flame, but he wouldn't suit a name like that. He's supposed to be fierce and fearless. But he's big softy, I'm afraid. I think he's gorgeous, said Grace. Me too, Your Majesty, but Uncle Falcon says he's going to send him to the mainland if he doesn't shape up, sighed Hetty. Dragon hounds aren't meant to be too tame. You see, it makes them useless if they ever had actually to fight a dragon. I see, said Grace. She wondered why the keeper was worried if she was so sure there was no dragons left on the island. The big dog flopped to the ground at Hetty's feet. Ever since it was a tiny puppy, he always loved rolling over to have his tummy tickled, she explained. That's why I call him Flump, a short of stuck. Is it all right if I tickle him too? Asked Grace, swinging her feet out of the stirrups and jumping down. Of course, Harry nodded. I'm sorry if he startled you earlier. I think I was more scared than you were. He's a big baby, really. It was my fault for being so silly, said Grace, tickling the enormous dog as he waved his huge hairy leg in the air like an untempered spider. It was dark under the trees and I saw his orange eyes. Well, I was sure it was a dragon. She blushed, realizing how silly Hetty must think she was. I suppose you heard I thought I saw a crimson on the cliffs of the other day? Yes, Your Majesty. That's why I am out exploring with Flump. Not that he'd be much use, but I've got this as well. As Hetty pointed to the silver trumpet, I sneaked it out of Uncle Falcon's cottage. It's an ancient dragon horn. It's supposed to calm them down if you blow it. Grace looked up to see the little girl laughing at her, but Hetty's eyes were wide with excitement. I wish I'd been here, Your Majesty, she said. It must have been amazing to see your real dragon flying right over your head. So you really do believe me? Said Grace. Even though your uncle thinks I am wrong? Of course I believe you, Hetty shrugged. It will be hard to imagine a thing like that, Your Majesty, especially if it really was as big as a flying rhinoceros. Grace smiled. She felt as those boulders slipped from her shoulders. Hetty might not be bigger than her little sister Pip, but at least she believed Grace. What Grace had seen. You don't have to call me Your Majesty, by the way, she laughed. I'm just Grace. Thank you, Hetty curtsied. Although my uncle wouldn't like that. He's very strict. Grace smiled kindly. She wasn't surprised the little girl was so afraid of a stern gamekeeper. She was about to tell her didn't have to curtsy either. But when she saw that Hetty's eyes were fixed on Billy, he was the most wonderful creature she had ever seen. Would you like a ride? Asked Grace. There was still time before she had to find her silly flower. Oh no, gasped Hetty. I couldn't do that. You are not scared of unicorns, are you? Said Grace. It didn't seem to fit with the way Hetty rolled around with Flump, scrambled through the trees like a monkey. Come on. Grace led Billy out to Scrubby Moor on the other side of the trees. See, he's a big softy, just like Flump, said Grace. But Hetty still hung back. I am not scared of Billy, not even a tiny bit, she said, jutting out her chin and glaring at Grace for even suggesting such a thing. But it's just that I'm not allowed. Surely you know that. Only a princess is ever allowed to ride a unicorn. Grace's mouth fell open. Really? But that's stupid. There was still so many things we didn't know about the royal rules and customs. So many of the things she had learned that didn't seem fair or right. Well, Billy's my unicorn, she said, and I give you permission. In fact, I insisted by royal order that you have a right now. Are you sure, Your Majesty? I mean, Grace? Hetty was jiggling from one foot in another with excitement. Of course I'm sure. Royally sure, said Grace, taking Hetty's silver dragon horn and resting it against the tree. What princesses get to keep the unicorns all to themselves? It was the silliest thing she had ever heard. Just as long as my uncle doesn't see me, said Hetty, as she tried on Grace's riding that she tied in the trap. Or my cousin Precious, smiled Grace, holding Billy's stirrup and helping Hetty into the saddle. I've dreamed my whole life of riding a unicorn, beamed the little girl. You're going to love it, grinned Grace. Chapter 8 The Little White Unicorn. Grace clipped Flump's lead to Billy's bridle and led Hetty up and down the sandy track, the top of the moors. First they walked, then they trotted. Flump bounded after them, wagging his tail. Oh, great! Gasped Hetty, who had at long stopped calling her Young Majesty. This is brilliant. I wish I could ride a unicorn every day. You can, said Grace. Or at least you can every day that I'm free. All we need is some nice flat grass and you'll have cantering in no time. Cantering? Harry nearly fell over the side of the saddle. You are natural, said Grace. But suddenly Hetty put a finger to her lips. Look, she whispered, pointing the path us brushing the bracken on the side of the path. We got a company. Oh! The white unicorn foal stepped out forward. His horn was no bigger than a pump on his head. Oh, sighed Rover at once. Billy whined. Hetty slid out of the saddle to grab hold of Flump. I've never seen a unicorn foal before, said Grace as they stood as still and quiet as they could. There were always foals on Coronet Island. In spring, whispered Hetty, but I've never seen one so white before. She knelt gently and pulled out a scrap of dry grass. Here, Chalky, she whispered, beckoning to the foal, and she put her hand to her mouth and gasped. Oh dear, I shouldn't have given my name. My uncle has always told me that. Hetty's big brown eyes were worried again. You know how it works, she said. Each first princess gets to name her own unicorn. When she chooses it, it belonged to her. It was true. Grace could never forget how she had waited for Billy to come out of the dark jade forest on the very first day at Tall Towers. All the other princesses had been paired with the unicorns right away. But it had seemed to take her ever until at last a shaggy black and white unicorn had decided to appear. Grace had named him Billy because he looked so much like a funny hairy billy goat, peering out at her from under falling mane. You're wrong about one thing, though, Grace said, turning quietly towards Hetty. A princess doesn't choose the unicorn chooses her. She stroked Billy's nose and smiled at the memory how her heart had felt that it would burst into joy as he first started towards her. It doesn't matter anyway. said Hetty, shrugging her shoulders and sticking out her lips in exactly the same way as Pip did when she was about to cry. You've already got Billy, and I'm never going to have a unicorn of my own, so I can't name this one, even if I want to. I'm not so sure about that, said Grace. Look. The little foal had scattered forward and heading straight for Hetty. Very gently, he stretched a snow-white muzzle and sniffed her hand. Hello there, Chalky, smiled the little girl. Then she threw up her hands. Oh, dear, did again. You careful, you'll frighten him, cried Grace. But too late. Chalky turned and galloped away, kicking up the sandy soil as he fled across the floor. I didn't mean to scare him, said Hetty, just pricking on the corner of her eyes. But I shouldn't have given him a name. It was wrong. Giving something a name that is like saying belongs to you, she sniffed. I promise I won't tell anyone. Not if you don't want me to, said Grace. Thank you. Hetty blushed bright red and flung her arms around Grace's neck. She blushed even more when her stomach grumbled loudly. Sorry, she giggled. I think this must be lunchtime, cried Grace, remembering why we was out here in the first place. I should have been back at school ages ago. She flung the reins back over Billy's head. How about some dragon heart? Suggested. What a funny name. Is it pretty? Not really, smiled Hetty, but it is the only thing that grows up here. She pointed back toward yellow-brown flowers that Bill had eaten when they came to the wood. There were hundreds of them growing like nettles along the edge of the trees. You're brilliant, cried Grace, snapping one of the single turn. At least there were lots and lots of them, so she wouldn't have to make a sketch. There was no time, even if she had to go and be drawing, and thanks to Fum, she didn't have a book to draw in anyway. I have been in such trouble if I had come back without a flower. Can we meet again soon and go on a dragon hunt? Screamed Hetty. Grace was sure the current crimson was long gone, but she could have been hugged the little girl over again for believing her. You bet, she said, and you can ride with Billy whenever you want. Billy swung her head across the saddle and trotted away. There's one thing you ought to know, Hetty called after. When dragons are flower or dry, they smell like... It was too late. Hetty's voice was lost on the wind. After 9, dragons heard. Pooh! Grace just stood in the middle of the bath studio holding her nose. So many flowers smell horrible! She coughed, pointing it and staring straight at Grace. I bet you make that dreadful smell, cousin. After all, you did like you've run into a swamp. I've been up the moors, actually, Grace blushed. Everyone else had left enough time to change into the ballet clothes, but Grace was still wearing her riding habit. It was splattered with Flum's huge muddy paw prints, and she had to admit dragon's flower really did not smell very nice. In fact, it wasn't a flower at all. It was some frayed, curly leaves and a few stripes of ragged yellow-brown petal. Right, class, said Madame Lightfeather. Let's see what the beautiful flowers you're all going to be. And she stopped in a mid-spin and wrinkled her nose. Whatever is that smell? It smells like... The princess snickered, all except Grace, who blushed as red as the beautiful puppy Scarlet was holding. Why are you still in your riding clothes, Grace? Asked Madame Lightfeather. You cannot dance in that heavy coat. Go and take all the moody birds off, at least. Yes, madam. Grace went to tuck off her riding boots on the step outside. She joined the back of the line as the other princess began to show the class their flowers. The twins had pink and peach-colored tulips. Super rich Princess Bielazesa had a yellow crotch so bright it looked as if it was made from solid gold. And Scarlet was holding up her fragile puppy. Why are you choosing this one, my dear? Asked Madame Lightfeather as Scarlet pursued. I love how red it was, how delicate the petals are, said Scarlet in her clear, quiet voice. It is almost as if they were made of tissue paper, I think. Lovely, said Madame Lightfeather, beamed. I know you will do a wonderfully graceful then to represent it, Scarlet. It was easy next. She had drawn a beautiful detailed sketch of a rare water lily, found only on the Silver Lake outside the ballet studio. I wanted to try and get a feeling of water in my dance, she said. Wonderful. Madame Lightfeather sketched more like a beautiful bird than ever, as she explained to Izumi. You need your arms and legs to flow like a stream. Grace was trying to concentrate. While all 4 more princesses took their turn, she found it hard to focus on the class. The terrible palm from a dragon-sword flower kept waiting on her nose. She was sneezing and sniffing. Her eyes were streaming too. The most princess kept glancing over at her. Most of them were holding their noses. "Wait," said Madame Lefeather, just as Precious was about to step up and take her turn. I, I think I'd better see Princess Grace next, so that she can take her pen outside before we all faint from the smell. "Oh, right. This is called Dragon's Heart," said Grace, stumbling forward. "Dragon's Fart, more like," hissed Precious. The whole class collapsed in fits of giggle. Grace knew she could probably have laughed too. She had been one holding stinky flower. Precious was like, "That's exactly what it smelled like." "Young Majesties!" cried Madame Blackfeather, lifting her hands so that long they fluttered like wings. "This is not a lady-like way to behave. I'm sure Princess Grace had chosen this flower for a reason. I'm sure we have some interesting ideas for her dance." "Ah, it looks like wheat to me," laughed Precious. Most of the class collapsed in giggles again. "Perhaps we could let you change it for something else. A blossom, maybe?" said Madame Lightfeather. Grace shook her head. She really didn't herself to see as a blossom. "A nodding daffodil or a delicate pansy?" suggested the teacher. "No, thank you." Grace looked down at her muddy drinking habit and her long feet, with one toe poking out the end of her sock. "This whole class thinks I'm scruffy as a weed anyway, and they're probably right," she sighed. "I'm sick of my dragon's heart and do the best I can to come up with some sort of dance." "Lovely, we'll look forward to see that much," said Madame Lightfeather, although she didn't sound at all sure. "Perhaps right now, although, you could take the plant outside, and Princess Trinket and Truffle, open the windows and let some air in." "My turn now," said Precious, pushing forward a black and yellow flower shaped like a snake's forked tongue. "At least this plant's not a weed." "My dance is going to be very powerful," Precious announced. But as Grace turned the door, she heard Madame Lightfeather scream. "Drop that at once, Princess Precious!" she warned. "Nobody touch it. That flower is called Serpent Nightshade, and is deadly poisonous." "Trust Precious to choose a poisonous flower," thought Grace, feeling a little better as she stamped outside, feeling muddy riding boots once more. "At least my dragon's heart won't kill anyone, not unless they die from the palm." So now I've done with reading chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. 9, yes. What? I'll read to you next time. Bye!